Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 37 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what's going on?
What's up? I was just trying to keep it going from the other podcast. What's up?
What's up? You just can't keep that going, man. It just dies.
It dies. It's just, yeah, it lost.
It's catchy for a second, and then it's gone.
I know it. I was just laughing too because I got notified there's a new restaurant coming to our area called the Fuzzy Taco.
Really?
Who would eat at a place called the Fuzzy Taco?
Is that a real restaurant?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Fuzzy Taco.
All right, Gibbs, let's do our Patreon shout outs. We have James Klein, Jennifer Lucas, Valerie Power, Nancy Brooks, Bree Moore, and Lisa Parker.
That's a lot of people.
Yep. So those are our new Patreon supporters. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And then let's go back into the vault. And this month for our Patreon vault supporter, we selected Julie McHugh.
Julie.
Big time supporter, been with us from the very beginning.
It's a long time.
And we really appreciate it. We appreciate the new support. We appreciate the people that continue to support us. And I got to give some PayPal shout outs, Gibbs.
Yeah.
We had Marjorie Prazon, Monica Leal, Kristen Smith, Sarah Smith, and Christopher Bergman.
Another good showing.
Yeah. No,
Wow.
It's awesome. So love the support. You know, we love all the interaction and support on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We got people telling their friends.
Hashtag Team Gibby. Yeah.
Hashtag Team Gibby. It's all good stuff, man.
It is good
Love
stuff.
it. And I got to give a huge shout out to my man, Jared Kelly. And Jared is this unbelievably talented artist. You got to go to jaredkelly.com to check out his work. Big fan of the True Crime All the Time brand.
Yes.
He listens to the shows, and he has heard me talk about being a Kentucky Wildcat fan.
Don't know why.
It's in my blood, man. I can't help it. And Jared sent me this unbelievable Kentucky Wildcat print. It's amazing. I'm going to hang it up in the studio as soon as I get a frame for it. And that's our first gift. That's our first gift to the True Crime All the Time studio.
All right. Thank you, JK.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, man. And really, if you go to his website, you will be blown away at how talented this guy is. So when you're done with this episode, if you haven't already, make sure you jump over, check out True Crime All the Time. We got a new episode out right now on the Hillside Stranglers, Kenneth Bianchi, Angelo Buono, and these guys are, what's the word, Gibbs?
Scum?
Scum of the earth? Lower than low? I mean...
Yeah, a lot of the ones we do are low.
They are, but...
Low.
It's hard to rank them. You can't rank these guys. They're just all...
Just bad.
They're all just bad people. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But, you know, check out the episode. It's out now. We got a bunch of voicemails in this week, and we'll play those at the end of the episode. All right, Gibbs, you ready to get into True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
We're doing the case of Stephanie Crowe. Stephanie Crowe was born April 12th, 1985. She was a happy, beautiful girl, very involved with her church. I mean, Gibbs, she volunteered at her library youth program.
That's cool.
This girl was liked by everyone.
And she was beautiful too, by the way. Part of this process was seeing her picture was kind of tough because she kind of resembles somebody in my family.
Always tough during the research process.
Yeah, absolutely was.
And the reason why it's tough is because 12-year-old Stephanie Crowe was murdered in her own bedroom of her home in Escondido, California, sometime between late nightfall of January 20th, 1998 to the early morning hours of January 21st. Now, Stephanie would not be found until the early morning of the 21st. She was found by her parents and her grandmother around 6:30 a.m., and they found her lifeless body on the floor of her bedroom. She had been stabbed 8 times, and one of the strange aspects of this case is that there were no signs of forced entry. Her window was found unlocked, but there was a screen in place. There was no disturbance to the window frame, no smudges on the dirt, the dust. I mean, police looked at it. They could tell.
So it looked like nobody climbed through it.
There was a sliding glass door in her parents' bedroom and it was also unlocked. So that's a likely point of entry, maybe. You know, it's an unlocked sliding glass door, but the intruder or the assailant, they would have had to have walked right past her parents.
Yeah, which you would think would be difficult, but you don't know. I mean, maybe they were heavy sleepers.
Could be.
You know?
But I think it's something to point out.
Yeah.
Police would find out that none of the knives in the home were consistent with the murder weapon, and no bloody clothes were found inside the house despite an extensive search. And the crime scene was very bloody.
And you expect that, you know, I mean.
With that kind of stabbing.
Yeah, exactly.
There were no fingerprints, no DNA, and the murder weapon was never found.
Makes it tough.
Very tough to solve a case so far. Investigators would eventually tighten the time frame of Stephanie's death down to a period of time between 10:30 p.m. and 12 a.m. So that's a much tighter time frame. We're talking about an hour and a half now, as opposed to originally it was
nightfall to dawn.
Yeah, that's a much bigger period of time.
Yeah.
As you can expect, the police questioned the family. They took their clothing for testing. They examined their bodies for, injuries that may have been caused in a stabbing type.
In the struggle.
Or struggle. And we have to talk about Stephanie's parents because they had just found out that they lost their daughter. They're being questioned by police. They end up getting put up in a hotel, and Stephanie's 2 siblings were taken to a county shelter for children. The parents were not allowed to see the children. They weren't allowed to communicate with the children.
No, and during that time, those 2 days, the police decided to go ahead and interview those children.
And because the parents had no contact, they didn't know that police were interviewing their kids.
I don't know. Can you really do that, though? I thought you had to have a parent in the around when you interviewed.
But this sounds like a situation where they were legally allowed to separate them. So they're technically in the care of the county.
So the county gives the permission.
Maybe. I don't know. Or maybe they don't need permission.
That'd be a way around it.
So they took Michael Crowe, which was Stephanie's older brother. He was 14 years old. They actually took him to the police station for questioning multiple times. And Gibbs, he quickly becomes investigators' main suspect for the murder of his younger sister after he was questioned. And I think one of the main reasons for this is that the police felt that the crime scene to them suggested that this murder had to be an inside job. And police would say that Michael was distant and preoccupied after Stephanie's body was found.
Yeah, they would say that, he would just sit around playing video games on a little handheld gaming system. He would just sit there, unemotional, and doing that. And they kind of thought that was strange and that he was just extremely disengaged.
Well, and I think I can understand why police would think that, being that unemotional, we're talking about your little sister being found murdered, that would be strange to them. I get that.
Yeah. But, you just don't know how different kids will react to different things. I mean,
well, and especially a kid.
Yeah. You can remember he's 14. I mean, you expect them to act a certain way, but you just never know.
And like we said, police interrogated Michael several times without his parents' knowledge and without an attorney present. And this is what Michael told the police. He said he woke up very early that morning around 4:30 a.m. He had a headache. So he went into the kitchen. He got some Tylenol. He washed it down with a glass of milk. And then he went back into his room. And police thought it was strange that Michael, on this trip from the kitchen back to his room, did not see Stephanie's body because her door was wide open and she was lying just a few feet inside the door. And he walked past it twice.
Yeah.
Once on his way to the kitchen and then the second time on his way back to his room.
So maybe, as you're walking to the kitchen when you first wake up, you don't have your wits about you. You're just kind of stumbling down the hallway. So I can see that. You could stroll past. It's dark. Well, for one, it's 4:30. It's definitely pitch black. So you're not going to see anything. If you're not turning your head to look. And then on the way back, that's where you kind of think maybe he's a little more awake. But then again, I know at least my boy, when gets up in the middle of the night, he doesn't know what the heck he's doing.
Yeah, I was going to say, even now as an adult, I'll get up in the middle of the night, go downstairs and do some stuff and really not have any memory of it.
Yeah.
My wife will be like, what were you doing last night? It was like 2:00 in the morning. You got out of bed. You were downstairs rummaging through. I was probably eating something.
Probably.
I don't remember it at all.
Except you wake up with peanut butter on your face.
Well, that's happened before. Now, during these interrogations of Michael, the police would falsely inform him that they had found physical evidence linking him to this murder of his sister. I have to keep saying that.
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine, Gibbs, being a 14-year-old boy. I can't see my mom and dad. Police are interrogating me, and they're basically saying, hey, we know you killed your little sister.
And not just interrogating, but interrogating you for long hours, right?
Yeah, long stretches of time.
Yeah, scared,
You don't have an attorney. 14-year-olds, they're not really equipped to deal with that.
No, they're not. They just want to sit in front of their Xbox.
And they also told Michael that he failed an exam with what they called a truth verification device. This was like a voice stress test.
Yeah.
Or a system that monitors distress in your voice, I think is what it was.
I think so. They pick up readings off of that.
He's going to be stressed out, Gibbs, for all of the reasons that we just mentioned. He's by himself. He doesn't know where his parents are. He doesn't have access to them.
Well, and on top of that, the police tell him that, hey, by the way, your parents think you did it too. That's why they're not here.
And that would be rough.
That'd be really rough, man.
So you talked about long stretches. At one point, it was said that there was one stretch of very intense questioning that lasted a full 6 hours.
That's nuts, man.
6 hours for a 14-year-old kid,
yeah.
Unless they're playing their video games or watching movies. That's a long time.
That's
to
nuts
to be in that kind of stressful environment. And it was after this very intense, long stretch of questioning that Michael gives a confession. He confesses to killing his sister, but this confession is very ambiguous. He doesn't provide any details, and he basically says that, he can't remember doing it, but he says he did it. This interview was videotaped by police, and at times on this videotape, Michael can be heard saying things like, I'm only saying this because it's what you want to hear. I mean, what's that telling you, Gibbs?
Yeah, I mean, he's just tired, pressured, lonely.
I'm done with this, man.
What do I have to do to get out of this room to see my parents?
At this point, I will say whatever you want me to say.
Yeah.
That's what I'm taking from, a statement like that.
And I'm not saying he didn't do it. I'm just saying.
I'm not either.
I don't know if that's the right way to go about it.
With a 14-year-old.
With a 14-year-old.
Now, we know police do this all the time. And with an adult who, has all their faculties, let's say, and is capable of handling a little more pressure, making their own decisions, I'm okay with that.
Well, and they know how to say the words, I want a lawyer.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point. More experienced. The older you get, the more experienced, the more you know. Yeah. The more you know about your rights, for sure. Yeah, Kids don't know that much about, what rights they have. And
guilty or not, the first things out of your mouth should be, I want a lawyer.
And I know you know that very well.
I want a lawyer.
You've had to use it multiple times.
Pull out your laminated card with your attorney's business card that's been laminated, hand it over. Or like some people have it tattooed.
Yeah, you haven't gone that far.
You haven't seen it yet, have you?
So getting back to Michael, he tells police that he did it. So after he says he did it, the police ask him the question, well, why did you do it? That's a logical question. They want to know why. And Michael tells police that he did it because he felt like his sister was a threat to him, that she was as good, if not better, than him at a lot of things. And he felt like that wasn't right. And he had this feeling like his sister was making him feel worthless.
Yeah, I mean, just typical competition between brother sister, right? She was getting good grades. Was his grades not as good as hers? She was better at, playing this game than the way he played it. Things like that. So, is he playing along because he just told them, I'm telling you what you want to hear. So now he's just adding more color to that so that they can go ahead and get him the heck out of that interrogation room and move him along.
So after these statements, Michael's arrested and charged with murdering his sister. And Gibbs, like you mentioned, the motive that police give is sibling rivalry.
Which is a thing.
No, it's a real thing. Michael was not allowed to attend his own sister's funeral.
Which is rough. I mean,
it's rough if you didn't commit.
If you didn't do it.
If you didn't do it. It really is. Because, there's certain things in life, Gibbs, that they only happen once. You can't get a do-over. And that's one of them. If you're not allowed to attend a family member's funeral because of something like that.
Right.
Nobody can make that up to you if later on it comes out that you didn't do it.
Right. Never got to say goodbye.
Yeah. It's just that can't be undone. Now, if you did it,
you don't deserve
tough shit.
That's
you
right.
don't get to go. You don't deserve it. But Michael wouldn't be the only boy that police questioned. They would question Joshua Treadway and Aaron Hauser. These were two 15-year-old kids that were both friends of Michael Crowe. Aaron Hauser had an assortment of knives, and apparently one of them was reported missing by his parents. And this knife would turn up at Josh Treadway's house.
Yeah, they found it underneath his bed.
Underneath his bed. He would later say that he had taken it from Hauser, but that looks very suspicious.
It does. Doesn't look good.
And we talked about long questioning of Michael Crowe. Police take Josh Treadway to the station, and they question him nonstop from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m.
11 hours.
And again, this is a 15-year-old kid. I don't think I could sit in a chair and be bombarded with questions for 11 hours. I would be looking for a way to get the heck out of Dodge too.
Yeah.
And in this interrogation, the police would tell Josh Treadway that they believed the knife that they found under his bed was the weapon that killed Stephanie Crowe. But police let Josh go home. But they bring him back 2 weeks later, and they have another marathon interview. This one lasts 10 hours.
Man, these are long interviews.
It's a long time. Josh breaks during this one, and he would give police a detailed confession in which he stated that he participated in the murder with Michael Crowe and Aaron Hauser. And in this confession, Josh said that Aaron Hauser was the mastermind. It was his weapon, but Michael was the one that had the motive. And we're going back to the sibling rivalry.
He says, God, if you want to kill my sister, did you have a role? Well, if my role was, what Aaron said was to get rid of the knife. Okay. But I didn't get rid of the knife. Why? I just put it on my bed. He said, if you find out that I told anybody anything, you're going to kill me and my whole family too.
So that's part of the actual police interrogation of Josh Treadway. Obviously, Gibbs, it's just a little piece because of how long we know this interrogation went. And after this confession, the police arrest Josh Treadway. And not long after that, Gibbs, they go and arrest Aaron Hauser as well. And they start questioning him.
He's a little tougher, though.
He is tougher. He's not cracking. He's not confessing. And he's consistently denying that he had any involvement in the murder of Stephanie Crowe. But police, they don't let up on him. At some point, they start asking him questions about if somebody were to have committed this crime, how would they have done it? And it's under this kind of prompting that Aaron Hauser starts to tell them how the crime might have happened. Now that all three boys are arrested, they have attorneys. And it's after this point that all three recant any of the statements that they made in their interrogations, claiming that they were all coerced.
And that's a good move. That's what they should do.
Well, and as an attorney, that would be something that you would want them to do.
That's how I would suggest if that was my practice.
As a former prosecutor or a former defense attorney, you know that better than anybody.
If I was that, I would say that.
And the majority of Michael Crowe's confession is going to later be ruled as coerced by a judge. I mean, a judge is actually going to come out and say that his confession was coerced by police.
Well, no guardian, long hours, under distress, just lost his sister.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see it anyway else.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons that the judge gives for the ruling is because Escondido investigators implied to Michael Crowe that they would talk to the district attorney and say that because he had cooperated, he would get leniency. So then we get to Josh Treadway's confession. And he didn't just confess once, Gibbs. He actually confessed twice.
Yeah, he did. Two different police departments.
Yeah, the first one was to Oceanside detectives. And the second, which was said to have been pretty much an identical confession, he said basically the same thing, was to the Escondido police. But the court ruled that the two confessions were basically redundant, and they ordered that the first be suppressed. But the second one they said was admissible in court. And as far as Aaron Hauser's statements to police, they were suppressed by a judge because it was ruled that police did not sufficiently advise him of his Miranda rights.
Big no-no.
Yeah, and I don't know how that comes into play. I mean, it's such a easy thing to do, and it's such a common practice. I don't know how police or detectives or whoever
Well, I think what they do is that they try to do that. We're just going to talk about it, buddy kind of thing. And then I think when the suspect, what was just a witness or a character person, now he becomes a suspect. They're into the story. They forget to stop and say,
I got you.
You have the right. Because if they know once they say that, if the person is intelligent,
They would stop saying what they're saying.
And not a kid. I mean, if they were an adult intelligent, they would say, get me an attorney.
No, what you're saying makes a lot of sense because, for a lot of things, you don't need to give Miranda rights.
Right.
But if it turns into something else, I guess you have to know that, hey, I got to stop right now and read the rights or bad things are going to happen.
Right. I think in today's world, they just right off the gate just read them out. Like, oh, man, thanks for coming in. I mean, I have to read these to you because,
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
it's what we have to do. But, then we'll get to what you came in here to talk about. Just try to brush it off a little bit.
So all three boys are charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder. And a judge ruled that all three should be tried as adults. And they were in prison for 6 months as prosecutors prepared the case against them. But some very interesting information comes out, Gibbs, just as the trial of Josh Treadway begins in January of 1999. And what happens is that Treadwell's attorney discovers that police actually had some DNA testing done on a fourth suspect. And this testing found 3 drops of Stephanie Crowe's blood on a shirt belonging to this fourth suspect. And police had known about this for some time. I mean, this wasn't something that they just discovered as Josh Treadway's trial was beginning.
So now they got some physical evidence?
Yeah, physical evidence. And based on this physical evidence, the charges against all 3 boys were dismissed without prejudice, which would allow charges to be reinstated against the boys at a later date. And that's important to clarify, whether it's with prejudice or without prejudice. And the confessions that police got using their, we'll call it aggressive interrogation techniques, right, Gibbs?
Right.
These are regarded as classic examples of false confessions.
And we can see why.
I can't see why. And it's concerning to me for this reason that I think we're seeing more and more of these types of false confessions. Or at least maybe they're just being publicized more. I don't know. One or the other. So we have to talk about this fourth suspect. And this was a 28-year-old transient by the name of Richard Tuitt. And Tuitt had been seen in the Crowe's neighborhood on the night of the murder. And what was said about him is that he was knocking on doors, he was, peering into windows, and this caused several neighbors to call police and report a suspicious person.
It's kind of freaky. You got some guy just randomly knocking on doors, peeking through windows.
Well, yeah, I mean, peeking through windows, you're getting into the area of like a peeping Tom, but that doesn't seem peeping Toms don't knock on your door or on multiple doors in the neighborhood.
Exactly.
But the Crowe's next door neighbor at the time, they would actually come out and say that they saw Tuitt that night. He knocked on their door and said, "I'm looking for the girl." And the neighbor said, "Hey man, there's no girl here. You have no business here. You need to get out. Get out of here." And apparently Richard Tuitt was looking for a girl that he knew as Tracy, who just happened to resemble Stephanie Crowe. And police would actually interview him on the day that Stephanie Crowe's body was found. And this is where we get the DNA testing from, right? Because they take his clothes that day, and during an examination, police noted some light scrapes and some cuts on his body and hands. That doesn't sound good.
Doesn't sound good at all.
And this guy had a lengthy criminal record. He was known to wander the streets of Escondido. He had been diagnosed as schizophrenic, and his family would say that they had taken him to the hospital at least 30 times.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has some issues from things that I read. He definitely had some issues.
Well, his criminal record included arrests for drug use, attempted burglary, and assault with a deadly weapon.
Things are adding up.
Well, they are, but this is what is so strange about this, because he's on radar from the very beginning. He's on radar at the same time as Michael is, but the police don't really consider him a suspect because they're so locked in, they're so focused on Michael Crowe.
Tunnel vision, man. We've seen it before.
And this is what I don't get, Gibbs. The DNA comes back, well ahead of the trial of Josh Treadway.
Yeah.
But they're still ready to go down that path. That's the one thing that I'm kind of struggling with. You would have thought that the minute that DNA came back, police would have made an all-out effort to look at Richard Tuitt.
Yeah, you're right. But I think we know probably why they didn't. As we dig in a little deeper, everybody else will kind of figure out why.
So we're a couple years later in 2001. And this is when the district attorney and the San Diego County Sheriff's Department asked that the case be taken over by the California Department of Justice. But it's not going to be until 2002 that the Attorney General would charge Richard Tuitt with the murder of Stephanie Crowe.
So 4 years after the murder.
Yeah, 4 years after the murder, Richard Tuitt is charged.
But his trial doesn't begin for another 2 years after that.
Yeah, it's not till 2004.
Yeah.
So
6 years since her death.
Well, and he's incarcerated for 2 years leading up to the trial. And on the very first day of jury selection, Tuitt escapes.
Yeah.
He bolts out of the courtroom holding area during lunch hour.
You can tell he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, man.
Well, he freed himself from his handcuffs.
So he's got some skill.
Got some skills, some smarts. And he actually makes his way out of the courthouse. And he's able to get on a bus. So that's something.
That is something. And to the point they take a few hours before they catch him again.
Yeah, they finally do catch him a couple of hours later. So when the trial begins, like we said, February 2004, the prosecution was able to connect Richard Tuitt to the murder of Stephanie Crowe by presenting both circumstantial and physical evidence. The physical evidence was Stephanie's blood found on his clothes.
Yeah, those 3 drops.
We talked about that.
Right.
Now, Tuitt's defense team argued that it was the 3 boys that had killed Stephanie and that Stephanie's blood was found on Tuitt's clothes as a result of contamination caused by shoddy police work. And that gets back to what you were talking about, Gibbs.
Yes.
Because remember, they took Michael's clothes the same day they took Tuitt's. And the defense would also argue that police got blood on themselves and their equipment at the crime scene. Tuitt's attorneys would claim that the blood on his shirt got there because police placed a tripod that they used to photograph the crime scene in Stephanie's blood. And that somehow got transferred from the tripod to his shirt.
Yeah.
And this goes back to what you talked about, right? Why didn't they go after Tuitt sooner?
Right.
From the very beginning.
And I think they realized that the evidence that they had of her blood on the shirt wasn't very solid. Well, I mean, so if you have a shirt from a 4th suspect that had the victim's blood on it and you choose to ignore it and continue pressing, I mean, wouldn't you stop and say, wait a minute, I know these kids confessed.
Well,
but this doesn't add up.
Well, I think it's either that or it's the fact that they just had this tunnel vision and they had the confessions.
So like a slam dunk.
And they thought that was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And so they, I don't know if you call it, they discounted the physical evidence, the blood evidence.
And they might have. It might have been a combination of a little bit of everything that they made the decision just to go, forward with the trial of the kids, which ended up backfiring on them. And now we're at this trial.
And when the jury gets the case, they're going to spend 8 days, Gibbs, deliberating. But on May 26, 2004, the jury acquits Richard Tuitt of murder, but they convict him of the lesser included offense of voluntary manslaughter. They also found that he used a deadly weapon, a knife, in the commission of the murder, and Richard Tuitt gets sentenced to 13 years in prison.
So let me just stop right there. 13 years. Found guilty, only 13 years. I'm sure it's 13 years to life, but 13 years?
Because voluntary manslaughter. Now, why is it voluntary manslaughter? Why does a jury deliberate for 8 days? That's a long time.
It is a long time.
To deliberate. It means they really had a lot of doubts, at least in my view. And the fact that they couldn't quite get to murder, but they couldn't maybe let him walk away. And I don't want to second guess the jury. It's really hard to be on a jury.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But you have to at least talk about it. You know, did they settle for voluntary manslaughter?
For them to take 8 days to get to a verdict, clearly they must have had issues with the evidence, the way the evidence was taken. And I think they probably had a tough time even putting him in the house, because how did he get in? No one saw him. They don't have any physical evidence of him being in the house besides 3 droplets of blood that come back around to the fact that the defense is saying you did shoddy crime scene work and that you could have got those 3 droplets of blood on his shirt that you took. So if you're sitting in a jury room, I don't know, I'd have a hard time convicting somebody of first-degree murder based off of just that evidence alone.
But they convicted him of voluntary manslaughter, got 13 years, and then he got 4 more years added on to his sentence because of his escape attempt.
Damn, so that's crazy. I just want to say that right now. One, dumbass for doing it.
Oh, yeah.
But 2, so...
I think I know where you're getting at.
That is a third of his regular sentence, right?
Yeah.
Almost a third.
Almost a third.
Yeah.
For
Just
what was a 2-hour
runaway
versus killing somebody.
I don't get that.
It's very strange.
Yeah. I mean, I think the 13 years should have been a minimum of 20. Minimum. And I don't think that's low enough, but that's just the minimum.
Well, because at the end of the day, Gibbs, the jury felt like he killed Stephanie Crowe. Call it what you want. They still came away feeling that he killed her. Now, Tuitt's attorneys appealed his conviction to the California Court of Appeals, and they raised several different claims. One of the claims was that his Sixth Amendment rights were violated because he was not allowed to fully cross-examine a prosecution witness. On December 14, 2006, the state appellate court found that the trial judge had committed a constitutional error in limiting the cross-examination, but they held the error to be harmless and they affirmed the conviction. The Supreme Court of California denied review, and the federal district court denied Tuitt's petition for habeas corpus. But things would change, Gibbs, 5 years later, because on September 8th, 2011, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit voted 2-1 to overturn Richard Tuitt's manslaughter conviction. And they ruled that the trial was unfair because the trial judge did limit cross-examination of a prosecution witness. They stated in their opinion, quote, "Given the lack of evidence tying Tuitt to the crime, the problems with the DNA evidence, the jury's deadlock and compromise verdict, and the weight and strategic position of testimony, this case is one of those unusual circumstances in which we find ourselves in virtual equipoise as to the harmlessness of the error." It was noted that during the trial, the prosecution could not produce any trace evidence of the house on the defendant's clothing or person, nor was any trace evidence of the defendant's person or clothing found in the house. These are facts that the Court of Appeals cited that led to their determination of lack of evidence.
The Attorney General will again try the case against Richard Tuitt here at the county courthouse downtown. The charge this time, though, is voluntary manslaughter, not murder. Richard Tuitt has grayed a bit since being sentenced to prison in 2004. That conviction overturned and another trial ordered, legal action that angers the victim's mother.
To let a killer go free, but there's no justice in this world for Stephanie. There just isn't. We've already accepted that.
But Tuitt could have been set free if the Attorney General opted not to retry because he's already served most of his time. This way, he may spend an additional 4 years in prison.
Because of the seriousness of the crime and public safety, we are proceeding.
Richard Tuitt was granted a retrial that began on October 24th, 2013. In closing arguments, his attorney told the jury that Tuitt had never been in the Crowe house, wouldn't have been able to find Stephanie's bedroom in the dark home. In addition, investigators didn't find his fingerprints. They didn't find any DNA in the house. The attorney said Stephanie must have been held down under a comforter to keep her quiet while someone else stabbed her. So right there, Gibbs, he's saying this could not have been committed by one person.
That's what he's trying to say.
That's what he's trying to say.
Yeah. He's trying to put the focus back on the boys.
Yep. He also said that experts testified that the blood stains on Tuitt's shirts were not there when those shirts were originally evaluated, which means they had to get there through later contamination when they were analyzing the crime scene. So these are the statements that he's making. Now, the prosecutor said during her closing argument that Tuitt was in the area of the Crowe home that night. He was knocking on doors, looking for a woman named Tracy. He was angry at this woman because she had turned him away a couple of years earlier. The prosecutor said Tuitt was obsessed and delusional, that he wandered into the Crowe house at about 10 p.m. through an open door, and once he got in the house, the prosecutor didn't know exactly what happened, but he went into Stephanie's bedroom, stabbed her at least 8 times, and her blood was found on his clothing that he was wearing when he was contacted by police the next day. So all the arguments are made. In this case, the jury gets it, and on December 5th, 2013, they return a verdict of not guilty. And there was a juror, Gibbs, that would come out later after the trial was over and basically said, there was no evidence that Tuitt was in the home, and that the jurors, they were all concerned that Stephanie Crowe's blood could have gotten onto his shirts through contamination.
Yeah, that's a big problem. So, plus they didn't have a murder weapon. They didn't have a lot of evidence. Let's just face it. I mean, it didn't sound like the prosecution really sold what happened once he got inside the house. Besides the fact that he eventually found himself upstairs and randomly picked her and, did the horrific crime.
So Richard Tuitt Gibbs is found not guilty. He can never be retried for the murder of Stephanie Crowe. And you have to talk about the 3 boys, right? At this time are older.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And they and their families, they sue the cities of Escondido and Oceanside. And all 3 of the boys, now men, right? They would get multi-million-dollar settlements in 2011. And then in 2012, a Superior Court judge made a very rare ruling. And he ruled that Michael Crowe, Josh Treadway, and Aaron Hauser were factually innocent of the charges. And he permanently dismissed the criminal case against them. They couldn't be charged. And then you have to talk about the Crowe family. They lost their daughter. They went through what they did with their son, Michael.
Right.
And they've never had a doubt that Richard Tuitt was the one that stabbed and killed their daughter, Stephanie. And Michael, he can't stand Richard Tuitt. and makes no bones about it. There's quotes out there of him saying, I can't even stand looking at him. The whole reason this happened is because of his choices, the choices of his family, and everyone who enabled him to get by.
So I get Michael. Of course he hates this guy. He feels this guy took his sister's life, even though that the court system let him out. He also knows that the whole reason he went through the pure hell he did was because of this, potentially because of this guy. And now this guy is free, can't be tried again. So if he did it or didn't do it, but Michael feels he did do it. So yeah, he just probably would love to have him one-on-one for a little bit is what I'm thinking.
But Stephanie's murder is still unsolved. And as much as her family may feel that Richard Tuitt is the killer, he's been found not guilty.
Yeah.
He's not a murderer.
And I've seen in
the eyes of the law.
In the eyes of the law.
In the eyes of the law.
And I've seen some articles and some newscasts where they've interviewed Stephanie's mom, and she's talked, that she was not happy with how the prosecution handled the case. So I can see the frustration of her and the family for sure.
Well, a family, they just want to see justice.
Yeah, my heart goes out to them.
Yeah, mine too. Mine too. And again, we don't know who had anything to do with what, but you feel for the family no matter what.
Absolutely.
And this one is such a different type of case, Gibbs, because you feel for the family in two different ways. They lost their daughter, Michael lost his sister, and then he lost some of his innocence.
He really did.
With what he had to go through. And that's another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved, the murder of Stephanie Crowe. Now, you'd love to see justice come about for the Crowe family. But I don't know, Gibbs, I think this is one that might be a little tough because of how many different people have been accused, multiple trials, acquittals.
And if they ever found somebody else, I think that their defense would use how the evidence was handled in the previous, and it'd be tough. But
and not only that, but they would use the other people that were suspected.
Yeah,
because that happens. I mean, even in the Richard Tuitt one, they tried to use the boys.
Yeah, I just hope the family, know that whoever did this will get their due justice one day.
Someday. All right, Gibbs. So we've got some voicemails. Let's play those.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. My name is Maddie, and I'm from California. And my boyfriend and I absolutely love TCAT. We drove from Sacramento to Whistler, Canada this summer, and we listened to TCAT the entire way up and down. There's not an episode we haven't heard. We really appreciate this podcast and the show. You guys rock. Continue doing what you do. Thank you.
Gotta love a voicemail like that, Gibbs.
That's a lot of Mike and Gibby, man.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Danny Jock. I just received your mug. I want to thank you for that. It came quick. And drink a lot of coffee. It is a staple of my sobriety. I'm 8 years dry on the dock, keeping my own time ticking.
I like Danny.
I do too. Danny's a good guy. Very interactive. This Danny Jock, dry on the dock.
I like that. That's
you
a
like
new
that?
tag
I just
there.
put that together.
Yeah.
But, in all seriousness, Gibbs, we were talking about it earlier. Unbelievably proud of Danny.
Yeah, nothing but respect.
Yeah, it's a lot of respect, man, to go through that, to be sober 8 years. I'm really proud of him. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I'm pulling for him, man.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike and Mike. This is Mike. I was just calling to make a suggestion. I know you guys did a podcast on Scott Peterson, but I was wondering if you guys ever heard of Drew Peterson. Go ahead and check him out. He's pretty crazy. Thank you. Bye.
Drew Peterson.
Drew Peterson is on the list for sure. Now it'll be on TCAT.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Angie calling from Montreal, Canada. I just wanted to let you know that I love your podcast and I listen as much as I can while I'm doing my job as a housekeeper. Also, just a suggestion for an episode is the Luca Magnotta case. He's not a serial killer, but his story is very fascinating. And yeah, keep up the good work, guys. Keep your own time ticking.
Canadian Angie, thanks for the voicemail and the suggestion.
Yeah, Gibbs, we'll definitely do Magnotta. That's another T-Cat, but you know, the guy was no serial killer, but he's in a lot of ways, he's worse than some of the serial killers that we do.
Yeah.
The guy was brutal.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah, he was sick. All right, so that's it for us. Another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.